we come together virtually as a council for the first time since start of COVID-19 pandemic, I hope that you and your families are well and have come safely through the COVID-19 lockdown. Some of you may be grieving for friends, family members or colleagues who have not survived, and I offer you my heartfelt condolences at this difficult time. Normal life was brought to a standstill for many of us in March, but that is just what our incredible superheroes sprang into action. I would like to thank all HARO key workers, NHS doctors, nurses, care workers, support workers, including undertakers, as well as all HARO staff, all HARO staff, for their hard work and dedication during the current crisis. As Mayor, I'm truly humbled by all the wonderful work being carried out, and it is a privilege to be in a position to thank all our countless voluntary organizations and volunteers who continue to make difference to those in time of need. Can I welcome you all to the meeting and refer members and officers to the published protocol for holding virtual meetings. There are two council meetings this evening. The first is extraordinary meeting and the ordinary meeting of council will follow immediately after that. Members, please ensure you have microphone on mute and your camera off unless you are speaking. In case of a technical problem, the meeting may be adjourned for a short while to try and resolve the issue. The meeting is being audio and video recorded and will be available to watch, listen on the website. Now, can I ask my chaplain, His Holiness Sri Raj Rajeshwar Guruji, founder of and spiritual leader of the International Siddhashram Shakti Center, to say prayer, please. Guruji, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Om Trambakam Vyajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanat Mrityumukshayamamrutat Hari Om Trambakam Vyajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanat Mrityumukshayamamrutat. We worship the God who is the fragrant and who sustained all living beings. May be liberate us from death, may be lead us from the immorality, just as the cucumber is related from the bondage. Hari Om Bhurbhuvaha Swaha Tasya Viturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Naha Prachodayat. Hari Om Shantihi 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 Om. Thank you.
Thank you, Guruji.
Thank you.
Now, please observe a minute silence to remember those who have lost their lives through the devastating COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you. Okay. Next item is declaration of interest. Can we take as read the published declaration of interest for both meetings? And I remind members that they need to leave the meetings if they have pecuniary interest in any item on the summons. Item number 2, which is the part of the extraordinary meeting. I would hope that we can unanimously support the proposal to confer the honorary freedom of Alderman Toms. Councillor Graham Hanson, would you like to move the recommendation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it's also great to see everyone, albeit it's only online. But it gives me great pleasure to be able to propose that we grant the freedom of the Borough of Harrow on Alderman Keith Toms. I've known Keith, probably I've lived in Harrow for over 50 years, and he's always seemed to be part of our lives. He's been involved heavily with the community, having been elected as a councillor for a number of years, and is quite a vocal member of the council, but also not just for Harrow, but across London and nationally. It's also, we'll be able to make some proper speeches, I think, later in the year when the motion's carried and the scroll can be presented at that time. But I would like to say that when you look back through the history of people, to have that commitment to the borough as a community activist and being a councillor for 50 years, and he joins a very great list of people who we've honoured in the past. The last person being Christine Bednall for 50 years. We wanted to do this early in the year, but the pandemic pushed us out the way. But it lines up with Alderman Tom's 80th birthday this year. He missed his party, had to cancel it, and he's postponed that. But I think it's a privilege for us to be able to present this to Alderman Toms later this year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Graham. Do you wish to second that, Councillor Osborne, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm very happy to second it. I've known Alderman Toms for this entire millennium, so it's been a long time. I just think it's well deserved. Obviously, there'll be more speeches, I suspect not least from Alderman Toms when we come to making the presentation, but it's incredibly well deserved and our group is happy to support it.
Thank you, Paul. Members, I intend to give you the opportunity to speak about Keith at the full council meeting when the scroll will be presented. Is the recommendation agreed by the Labour Group? Mr. Leader?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it is.
And Deputy Leader? And by the Conservative Group?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So that's agreed?
Yes, it is.
This is the end of the meeting, extraordinary meeting. Thank you. We will now commence the ordinary meeting of the council. First item on the agenda is minutes of the past meeting. Can we agree the minutes of the meeting or held on 27th February 2020, subject to Councillor Almond's published amendment? Is it agreed?
Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Procedural motion. I intend to have one debate for motions 1 and 2 as they are on the same topic. We will vote separately on each motion. Is it agreed?
Yes,
Labour Group?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next item is on petitions. Members, as one petition and three of the public question relate to live planning application, planning committee members and the reserves should be mindful not to say anything which suggests predetermination. I understand that Margot Demlik will present a petition for Headstone Horticultural Society and Sue Green will present a petition on 265 the Ridgeway. As these two petitions have over 2,000 signatures, there will be a debate this evening. There will be a period of 10 minutes for each petition. Please be aware that I wish to ensure that as many members as possible have the opportunity to speak, so please be concise. Margaret Domlik, please read the terms of the petition.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I need to declare an interest on 265 the Ridgeway.
Yeah.
As I live on the Ridgeway, so I've got a pecuniary interest, and I did mention it in my email. So
that's right, yeah.
Hopefully I will be taken off and then put back on again when the item is finished.
Andre, please can you take Councillor Anjana Patel off at the moment? She can rejoin for the second petition.
can I say my?
I can still see you there, Anjana. Andre? Oh, it's off. Okay, Margaret, please carry on.
Thank you.
You got 1 minute to say your petition, Margaret.
Thank you. The
And I'm
committee.
time you.
Okay. The committee members of Headstone Horticultural Society and the Widgeratna Surgery oppose plans to build on their 2 sites on Long Elms. The society opens as a plant sale to fund year-round voluntary work. The site provides a safe space for the vulnerable, those with mental health issues, disabilities, victims of abuse, homelessness and loneliness. The list goes on. The supply of goods for the allotment, they supply goods for the allotments they serve and Harrow residents. They have been offered an unsuitable site on Harrowfield Rec and a last-minute offer on a smaller portion of the land that they already occupy, which is insufficient. The evictions will be to the detriment of thousands of patients. The residents who rely on accessing the volunteers will feel disparity once they are removed. Construction will disturb Kent House Care Home, who specialise in dementia, and take away their GP. We bear in mind the lack of space in nearby surgeries and infrequent transport links to Belmont. We urge the council to provide transparency in the events leading up to these end of tenancy notices. We ask the council to retract the societies and surgeries end of tenancy, secure a new long-term lease on their current sites, and work alongside us in improving the Headstone area and community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any members who wish to speak on the petition? Now we're going to start debating it. So, Councillor Ferry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You've got 10 minutes to debate for the petition.
I'll be very brief if I can. The proposal in this petition refers to 2 council properties, one known as 252 Long Elms, and the piece of land adjacent, which is occupied by the Headstone Horticultural Society. And as the petitioner said, who, as well as holding plant and compost sales each weekend during the summer,
We can't hear you,
undertake.
Councillor. Carry on.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Carry on, carry on.
Eh?
Carry on, Councillor.
Where did you lose me?
Just start again, probably.
Okay, right. The proposal in this petition refers to 2 council properties, that known as 252 Long Elms, and the piece of land adjacent, which is occupied by the Headstone Horticultural Society, who, as well as holding plant and compost sales each week during the summer, undertake very much outreach work in the local community. 252 Long Elms is occupied as a satellite doctor's surgery and is open part-time. The lease for this property expired last month, that's June 2020, and the clinical commissioning group are in the course of refurbishing the Belmont Health Centre to move this satellite practice into the health centre, which leaves the property at 252 vacant. And I would like to point out it was the clinical commissioning group's decision not to renew the lease. Had they come to us with a proposal to renew the lease, I'm sure that we would have accepted that. It is always the council's aim to make the best possible use of its property assets, and the need for affordable council housing has meant that plans are in the early stage of examining its redevelopment potential for 100% affordable housing. Officers met with the society in 2019 and offered to consider solutions that would enable the provision of this much needed housing and maintain the presence of the society with improved facilities. It has to be said that these discussions did not progress, and as a result only limited design work has been progressed so far. No planning application has yet been submitted and would not be until we have consulted on design proposals. Officers recognise that discussion regarding this proposal did not get off to a good start with the Horticultural Society, but are now hoping that bridges have been built with the society, and we are discussing with the society the option of either remaining on a reconfigured site or moving to a new location. It has to be noted that this council has an urgent need for affordable housing with about 1,200 households currently. Yeah.
Can you please conclude, please?
Yep. So we've 1,200 households currently in temporary accommodation waiting permanent housing.
Thank you very much. Councillor John Hinckley, please. I'll come to Marilyn in a minute. Is John Hinckley there?
Hello.
Oh, yes. Yes, carry on, please, John.
I can't see myself, but never mind.
That's fine. I can
Good
see.
evening. I'd like to speak in to support the petition, and I think, echoing what Councillor Ferry said, he did get off to a very bad start. The briefing note from the Estates Department back in January said, this is a small society. They're never open. And when they met with the members of the society, the message basically came over that we're going to do this and you should go quietly. Well, unfortunately, the Headstone Horticultural Society might be a small society, but they've managed to get over 3,000 signatures on a petition, which in these COVID times is quite remarkable. On top of that, I think that some of the things that Councillor Ferry said are possibly slightly facile, but never mind, that's for a further debate. But to remove that surgery will mean that there are 2,000 patients who need to find a home. And I don't know if members have tried to get from Headstone Lane to Belmont. It would mean 2 buses and much of congestion on the road. So I do believe that this proposal is ill-conceived, and the best thing to do is to put it in abeyance and grant the Horticultural Society a permanent lease on that site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marilyn, please. You need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yes, I have. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Mayor, I can only echo what Councillor Hinckley has said. I think the council, and I'm very pleased to hear, it's quite unusual, Councillor Ferry at least admitting that things haven't gone that well in terms of the relationship between the council and both the Horticultural Society and the doctor's surgery. But what I would say is that the council, and I keep using this phrase because it just is so appropriate, have behaved in a high-handed manner. They've upset a lot of people. You don't find 3,000 people willing to sign a petition unless it's caused a lot of upset. The Horticultural Society is a wonderful oasis of calm. They do the most amazing products and hanging baskets. They improve people's lives, particularly in these trying times, by people doing their growing, planting and so on. It's wonderful for people's mental health. I really can't see how it could possibly be worth our while, for the sake of 4 houses, to upset all these people and treat these good people who do such a wonderful job so shabbily, quite frankly. As for the doctor's surgery, it does fulfil a very important need. We are not the CCG, we are Harrow Council. We have a duty of care to our residents. It is completely unacceptable the way that these people have been treated. And quite frankly, I would respectfully ask Councillor Ferry and the powers that be who run this council to desist from any further attempts to get these people off the site, give the Horticultural Society the lease that they deserve and the security of tenure that they seek, and allow the doctors to carry on doing their excellent work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Marilyn. Stephen Griff, please. Stephen? Yes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Just before I speak, I just wanted to declare an issue that declare an interest that's arisen as a result of Councillor Ferry's comments. In that I am a member of the patient participation group at the Enterprise Practice of Belmont Health Centre. That's a non-pecuniary interest, so it's just for information. So just really wanted to say that I agree wholeheartedly with the petition. It would be an absolute tragedy to lose these very valued facilities. In particular, the Headstone Horticultural Society is a real jewel in the crown of Harrow. It offers so much to the local community in Harrow, Weald and elsewhere. You know, you really can't replicate what they do, even if you tried. And you know, once it's gone, it's gone. And the cost of that overall to the council will be a lot more anything the council could make by removing them from the site. So I would really urge the council to rethink their approach and find a way to retain the Horticultural Society as well as the surgery. Now I've had quite a number of people contacting me with concerns about this, and I just wanted to read an extract from one of the responses that I've received, because it's quite powerful. So the Headstone Horticultural Society provide a service way beyond plant sales, garden advice and weed killer. I myself have had the experience of the support they provide. In the last 12 months, I've lost my only sibling in March, followed by my mum in October and uncle, who was like a dad to me. And I was a carer for both for a very long time. The lady that runs it, Lucy, made the coffin up, made the coffin top for us for my brother's funeral. And when I had made a memorial garden for him, donated me a few plants to help. I wandered back in one day, not really knowing what I was doing, and very emotional, and the support and kindness I was shown there was and still is amazing. Whilst I have been there just sitting or wandering around the plants, many people have been there for help of all kinds, from form filling to just sheer loneliness. I witnessed how the lady set up a system so that by appointment those shielding could come by car to walk around by themselves among the plants for the first time being outside in months. These are just a couple of things this amazing little place provides us with, as the list is actually very long. For some people, they actually have no one else and would have to wait for weeks or months to access a service to help them, including shopping. We need this. What others might feel is an insignificant little plant sale and what is being left to run down, the doctor surgery and Headstone Horticultural Society have been maintaining the grass and gardens so it does not look abandoned already. We need this multicultural little corner in our community as it keeps us going and joins together. I would say, Mr. Mayor, that really speaks for itself, and that we lose this valuable facility at our peril. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks for keeping time. Okay, we have had a full debate on this item. Thank you to all the contributors. The petition will be referred to the Corporate Director for Community. We're going to take the second petition now. Sue Green, is she there? Is Sue Green there, Andre?
We're just checking for you at the moment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll wait for a minute or so.
Just to let you know, she's not in the meeting at the moment, but we are just trying to call her in.
Oh, somebody's there.
There we are. We're done.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Sue. You got a minute to read the petition, please. The mic is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I present this ongoing petition of over 2,000 names on behalf of concerned residents and local groups who are dismayed at the scale and inappropriateness of this plan. The area is not included in the Harrow Regeneration Project, and the land is subject to a covenant which excludes residential use. Proposals to erect 178 mainly 1 and 2 bedroom flats is out of character in an area of mainly 2-storey, 3-bedroom houses and contravenes the D1 category, which is within councillors' means to uphold. The developers described this as a brownfield site, however, it's not registered as such. The meeting hall only occupies a small area within the site and the car park surface is permeable. It is a key link in the Harrow Green Grid as mentioned in the Arboricultural report and is further evidence this is a greenfield site. The ridgeway is too narrow for vehicles to queue to access the site and will prevent the smooth flow of traffic. The road over the Cattle Bridge has restricted visibility and only has a very narrow footpath on one side. The meeting hall was used infrequently and never at peak times, but the users deemed the entrance dangerous enough to have someone stationed at the gates to direct their members safely out onto the main road.
Sue, can you conclude your petition, please? You've already gone over the time.
Well, contrary to the fanciful figures given by developers, such an extreme development will place a significant burden on the road network. Due to unrealistic parking provision on the site, it is inevitable residents will park in surrounding roads where parking space is scarce, and due to large parked vehicles, is already difficult to filter onto the main road. The neighbouring allotments. The neighbouring.
Sue, I think I need to. Sue, I think you've taken double the time. Do you want to have a final couple of lines for it, please?
Okay, there are many more concerns regarding this development, and 1 minute is not enough time to outline all residents' anxieties. In light of this, they urge councillors to properly consider the unprecedented number of objections and do everything in their power to reject it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Are there any members who wish to speak on this petition? The leader, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Sue, for your presentation of the petition. I think there's two key issues here, and we need to make sure that they are separated out. Actually, there's three key issues. One of them, it is an emotive application, and I have received a significant number of emails which I've responded to, and I know the ward councillors have as well, a number of concerns that have been raised. What we need to do, and we tried to explain to the Cabinet last week, is that we need to separate out, it's quite clear that we cannot predetermine the outcome of this a planning application prior to having all the information available, which will be in the report. So no decision has been made, and it has been going to the planning committee in September, where the whole report will be considered against the planning legislation. And it can only be considered against the planning guidance, planning legislation, and planning policies. And there's also over the years, people have been very concerned as councillors. We've been very concerned where if you say slightly something the wrong way, and this is why I'm being very cautious, like I was on last Thursday. If you say something slightly wrong, it could look like you've predetermined the decision, and then if the planning committee was to turn it down, they could appeal and win on the predetermined situation. So councillors are very cautious about how they approach this. If you ask for my personal view, I also think it's probably an overdevelopment of the site. I think it's probably out of character with the site, and the biodiversity you mentioned, I think needs further investigation. But when the report is finally presented, we can consider those views, because the officers would have gone through that in some detail, and it would be based against the planning policies. So it's not saying that we either agree or don't agree. It's making sure that we can have a view on something, but we can't come out and sort of say that we've made our mind up on it. And that's why councillors are exceptionally cautious around planning, because we could lose an appeal if it went ahead. Turning to the part around the covenant.
1 minute left.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Turning to the part around the covenant, Councillor Ferry did respond to this part of the question last week. And it is a separate part to the planning application. So someone can put a planning application in on a piece of land, even though they don't own the land. You just tick a box to say whether you own the land or not, or whether you notified the landowner. So it's separate to what happens with the covenant. The covenant is a commercial asset. I put it that way because it's a value to the council. And we haven't received any sort of application to remove the covenant. And this is why Keith responded in that way as he did last week. If you ask me about the covenants like you have tonight, as the leader of a council, I wouldn't be minded not to remove the covenant on the land. But that is separate to the planning application, where the planning application is considered at the planning committee, and the covenant decided whether we want to go ahead as a commercial, or not commercial, but it's whether we want to remove it. And at the moment, we're not minded not to remove the covenant. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Adam Swirsky, please.
Mr. Mayor, would you mind if Councillor Robson went before me?
Okay. Paul, please.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to very briefly say, for those who don't know, I'm one of the West Harrow councillors, and I am a member of the Planning Committee. I could be part of the decision-making body when the planning application is presented to the Planning Committee. I therefore could not be part of the discussions and meetings with residents, although as ward councillor, I know and understand their concerns, your concerns, Sue. I can comment on the issue of the covenant on the site, which I trust will be carefully considered. Thank you, Adam, for giving me the opportunity to make that brief statement, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll invite Paul first and then Adam again. Paul, please. Paul Osborne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I have an advantage of not being on the planning committee, and therefore I'm free to speak and in no way will predetermine any outcome because the planning committee will take their own view. But I think I wanted to start off by congratulating the Labour administration here. I mean, with everything else that's going on, the fact that they've managed to annoy 5,000 people, so we start this meeting with 2 petitions, seems to me quite incredible. But I think on this particular thing, I want to say I do believe it's an inappropriate development. I do believe it's a massive overdevelopment of that site. I believe it's absolutely out of character with that area. That area I know quite well. And this would just dwarf anything that's in any way nearby. But I think what we could do, and I hear Graham was a bit firmer on it than Councillor Robson was, we can put the residents out of their misery and relieve a lot of the stress now by just saying that the council will not release the covenant, that the council will prevent this from going ahead. Regardless of the planning decision, the council has the ability to say no to this particular development and to enforce its covenant. So I'd ask Councillor Robson again if she wants to say what her view will be on that, because she sits on cabinet and will have a vote on whether or not the covenant is enforced. I'd ask Councillor Swirsky when he speaks if he can answer the question. And I would ask Councillor Henson to go a bit further and just say to these residents they don't need to worry. The council believes this is inappropriate from a strategic point of view rather than a planning point of view, and therefore they will draw a line and stop this application, even if it gets planning permission from being built. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Adams, please. Adam Soski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to thank Sue Green and the more than 2,600 people who signed the online petition, as well as many others who've shared objections. This is clearly a large and highly contentious development in the middle of a low-lying and beautifully green part of the borough. And in my conversations with residents, they've raised a whole range of very serious issues, ranging from the height and density of the development, the impact on traffic on the already very busy Ridgeway, to the effect on the neighbouring allotments. And thanks to Mark, Wendy and Sue from the allotments, I saw for myself the impact of the loss of tree coverage at the border with the allotment site. And the trees marked on the developers' designs are fantasy trees. They don't exist. I note, Mr. Mayor, the covenant the council holds on the site. We've received no request to change that covenant. And we know that any decision would have to go through cabinet entirely separately to the planning committee. So it's very clear that there's a very long road to go for this planning application, and there are many very fundamental concerns to address. And I look forward to continue working with West Harrow residents to make sure that decisions taken by the planning committee and the cabinet are the right ones for the future of the ward and the borough. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. I had Amit Jogia's hand on. Does he want to speak? Amit Jogia? Okay. Marilyn, you can start.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was having IT issues. I was just having some IT issues before, and I wanted to declare a non-pecuniary interest that I own a property on Headstone Lane in relation to the previous petition, which I had submitted, but I'm not sure if it was declared. Thank you.
Thank you. Marilyn, we've got only just 1 minute left.
Yes, I know. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I shall be very brief. I am the Conservative spokesman on the Planning Committee, and therefore I will make no comment whatsoever on the planning material considerations of the planning application. The thing that puzzles me, and I think probably puzzles all of the people that signed the petition, is more to do with the covenant, because it does seem rather odd that anybody would make such an effort and spend so much money and on very expensive planning consultants and putting in an application where they're not to be have given the idea at some point from the council that they stood some chance of having the restricted covenant lifted so that they could use some of the site for housing. So it's all very well West Harrow councillors and other people trying to be nice about this. Of course they would be, it's their ward and they want to get re-elected. But in the end, what matters, and I'm only talking about the covenant, is the puzzle for me and for a lot of other people, is why we ended up in a situation like this in the first place, when actually it could have been closed down very simply. And I hope I'm wrong, but I do find it a little odd, Mr. Mayor. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Marilyn. Paul, you got your hand still on. Do you want to say anything? Okay, thank you, Paul. Right, we have had a full debate on this item. Thank you to all the contributors. Thank you for taking the time to attend the meeting to present your petition. The petition will be referred to the planning committee. Do any other members of the public wish to present any other petitions? There are none. Thank you. Do any member of the council wish to present a petition? Councillor Suresh, I think you wanted to present petition on Reynolds Lane car park. Yes. Councillor Krishna Suresh.
Yes.
You got 1 minute, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Since 1 minute given, I'm reading the shorter version. Mr. Mayor, I'm submitting this petition on behalf of High Worple, Worple Way, Worple Close, Tresco Gardens, Newlyn Gardens, and Rayton Close. Over 1,200 residents signed this petition, which means over 71% of household oppose this Transport for London planning application, reference number P/1448/20, redevelopment of Reynolds Lane car park. The proposed development should be refused on the following grounds: by reason of its size, depth, width, height, and massing. The development would have an unacceptably adverse impact on the amenities of the properties immediately adjacent to the site and the surrounding area by reason of overlooking and loss of privacy. The development would significantly alter the fabric of the area and amount to serious cramming in what is already a high density area. The ex-Ladbrokes building in Reynolds Lane has already been converted into 230 of flats in 2018. Matrix Lakes in 48 flats. Adding the further total of 128 flats to Reynolds Lane is clearly constitute overdevelopment. Due to the pandemic, this application should be delayed until the local community can have a fair opportunity to present their views and for the council to thoroughly consider the wider public interest. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Suresh. Okay, the petition received will be referred to the Corporate Director for Community. Thank you. Now we are going to the public question. We only got 15 minutes for 6 questions. So I'll request that the questioners should just go straight to the question. They can leave the preamble because that's been published and everybody has read it. So I'm going to take the first question now. Sue Green, are you there? Sue Green, please.
I'm here, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please. Can you please ask the question straight because we only got 15 minutes and 6 questions. Thank you, Sue.
I would just like to say that I'm almost apologising for my question because I hadn't listened to this debate, or this debate hadn't taken place, and I am encouraged by it. So I am quite embarrassed with the question. However, I will say it. Thank you.
Yes, please. Carry on.
Several months ago, I wrote to 53 councillors, and I was only contacted by one person, who is Councillor Marilyn Ashton, the Conservative councillor. And I wondered if this reluctance to respond to a resident's concerns seemed to be uniform among the whole of the Labour Council. And could they reassure concerned residents that this development plan has not already been decided and rubber stamped, contrary to what the council is saying to the Harrow public? I also would like to refer to Councillor Ferry's remark at the 9th of July cabinet meeting and I quote, "Should we be minded to release the covenant, we would need a substantial amount of compensation for doing so, and that would be over $500,000. I hope you'll understand that this remark is troubling on several levels. Firstly, that you're considering a sum to overturn the covenant at all. And secondly, that figure would not deter the brethren if it meant getting their hands on £8 million.
So can you go to the question, please, Sue?
So people are asking, is this further evidence the council are complicit in an underhand decision to remove this covenant? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask, is it Councillor Robson answering this question, or is it legal?
It's for me, Nitin. I'll respond to it.
Thank you very much, Leader.
Yes, the question's been added to since it was first published, but I would respond to some of the points that were raised during the debate on the petition as well. The planning guidance and legislation comes from government, and we have to follow that guidance and regulations. Otherwise, we could be overturned quite easily at an appeal. And anyone can put in a planning application, and it has to be considered, and it has to be considered on all the facts available regarding to planning. So you can put a planning application in to build on the Civic Centre car park if you wanted to, and it would have to be considered in accordance with the planning legislation. With regards to as a decision, as I think as Sue has recognised, there's no decisions being made because the report is still being compiled, and the report will be published prior to the September planning meeting, where the planning committee will interrogate that report. There'll be opportunities for people to question that report, and also for the officers and to respond, and then the due consideration can be made on how that progresses. I've already said, and this thing about the covenant, it was asked before whether we want to remove the covenant, we said no, and no one's asked since whether we wanted to remove it. And I said just earlier on, we're minded not to remove the covenant, because why should we? But that doesn't stop the planning application proceeding because of legislation, and allows how it progresses through the system.
Thank you, Leader. Do you have any supplements, Sue? I don't think so. Okay, can we go to question number?
Thank you, Mayor. No, I don't. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sue. Thanks for taking your time to come on. Mike Williams, can you ask your question, please?
Yes, I can, but Chair, I can save a little time. My primary question has actually been well addressed by the earlier debate. So if it works, I'm happy to just cut straight to my supplementary.
Okay, it's up to you.
Right, yeah, I'll do that. I was asking if the council were concerned about this development, and it's pretty clear from the comments that they are.
Sure.
So my supplementary question, which I have also prepared, the council has a rare opportunity on the Ridgeway site. The additional protections offered by the covenants and the D1 listing were specifically intended to give the site protections over and above the standard planning considerations. Given the sensitive nature of the site and the overbearing nature of the proposed development, will the council now use those additional protections and write to the site owner and make it clear that, entirely separate from the planning process, the council does not favour any change of use or removal of the protective covenants?
Leader, please.
Yes, we have. So I have been in correspondence with a large number of residents about this, and some of these issues we have discussed. I don't think I have been emailing Mike, I think, but I don't think I've raised this issue with. We keep on the covenant itself. As I said, we're saying we wouldn't release the covenant, but the thing is, no one's ever asked to do so. So first, someone has to ask to do it, and they haven't. But if they, in writing, they have to formally ask, and then we formally say we're not going to do it. In conversations, we've said we're not going to remove the covenant, and that view hasn't changed since they asked a few years ago, which Councillor Ferry reported at the Cabinet last week.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Leader. Thanks very much, Mike. Thanks for coming on.
You should be sent to them. That may be sufficient.
Okay. Question number 3. Is Sandra Cooley here? Andre, is Sandra here?
No, Mr. Mayor, she's not attending tonight. Unfortunately, she can't join.
Fine. So I'll just treat. She has asked me to read the question actually. So I'll just treat it as read. And can I directly go to the leader to answer the question, please, leader? Question number 3, please.
I think Councillor Ferry was going to answer this one because it's to do with the similar to the petition that was earlier on.
Okay, Keith, please, on to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's concerning the Belmont surgery and the other surgeries and the Harrow Horticultural Society. The project you refer to is, I understand, at the early feasibility stage, which has been delayed due to the coronavirus pandemic. In respect to the doctor's surgery, the surgery is a rarely used satellite surgery that the doctors occupy under a lease, as I said, expired last month. The clinical commissioning group are in the middle of refurbishing the main surgery at Belmont Health Centre to incorporate this surgery into the main practice to save themselves some money. The decision to close the surgery is one for the clinical commissioning group and not the council, who would have looked to increase the length of the lease for the surgery if the CCG so required it. So those that are concerned about closing the surgery, I would ask them to petition the clinical commissioning group, who are the people that will make the ultimate decision whether they stay there or move somewhere else. The council has looked at plans to redevelop the property in conjunction with the land next door occupied by the Horticultural Society for affordable housing. Officers are in discussion with the society regarding alternative locations for the group, and the aim is to include their relocation as an integral part of this project.
Thank you very much, Keith. Question number 4. Is Theoban Rosary there?
Hello.
Hello. Yes, I can hear you. Can ask the question, please. Please ask the question directly.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question is addressed to Keith Ferry. As we're in the midst of the COVID pandemic and in light of the disgraceful way elderly residents of care homes have been treated in the past 4 to 5 months, does the council want to be seen to ignore the needs of the community, particularly the Kent Care Home for the elderly? As their local doctor's surgery is to be developed into a housing project and a car park to be built on the site next door, and has any consideration been given to the elderly residents regarding the noise and disruption levels to be inflicted on them during the proposed demolition and build? And also the change of use for what was a quiet area will now be initially vacant, subject to fly tipping and antisocial behaviour, and ultimately noisy at all times of the day and night from the proposed car park. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, okay. I partly answered the first part with the answer to the previous question. There's 2 other items that have come up in this question about fly tipping and antisocial behaviour. It's hoped that development might commence as soon as the surgery is vacated, but if this is not the case, then the council will ensure that the site is secured to prevent any fly tipping or antisocial behaviour. On behalf of the planning committee, I would say that the elderly residents who live next door will be safeguarded by a condition in the planning consent, should the planning consent ever come to fruition.
Thank you. Have you got any supplement?
Yes, I do. Yes, indeed. As many of the multicultural in the community we serve do not have a voice when we leave in August after the termination of this lease. And considering the amount of people who have filled in the petition and object so strongly about the removal of both the Horticultural Society and Doctor Surgery, perhaps the council elections will show members where they stand with the majority of their constituents. There seems to be more to this than meets the eye, and I have no confidence now in the answers given, quite frankly. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith, you got any answer for that?
I don't think an answer is appropriate.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to question number 5. Lucy Halliday, is she there?
Hello?
Yes, Lucy, please ask your question. You've got a minute. Try and be precise, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Ferry, would you agree that you always answer questions of the Cabinet based on facts?
The answer is, as well as I'm able to, I will base them on facts.
Okay, do you have any supplement?
At the last Cabinet meeting, you stated that, and I quote verbatim, met with Headstone Horticultural Society at an alternative site, which they think is far more preferable because it allows more parking. As the trading secretary, I can confirm that we have never met, spoken or entered any agreement with you, nor does the doctor's surgery move.
In my answer,
yes, please.
Yes, I have instructed my officers in the Corporate Estates Department to hold a meeting with the Headstone Horticultural Society with a view to investigating an alternative site for their operations. This meeting was held, I believe, on or around the 23rd of June, and my officers reported back to me that much progress was made in identifying a site in Harrow Weald. If I have given the impression that I was personally present at the meeting, then I hope this clarifies the matter. I am, of course, quite ready to personally meet members of the Headstone Horticultural Society, subject to COVID restrictions, if this would help them in their search for a more suitable site.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Lucy, for coming. Question number 6, I think Anjana Patel may have peculiar interest. Anjana? Do you want to leave the room, please?
Mr. Mayor, she's out of the room.
Okay, thank you very much. Jonathan, are you there? Jonathan, please.
Hello.
Yes, please ask your question directly without any preamble, if possible.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council, and also thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your opening remarks at the beginning of the whole session today. Again, because my question relates to the Ridgeway, the debate earlier on, in some senses, has answered some of my concerns. But I think as you've got the question there, I'll ask it nonetheless.
Thank
you. Hello, I'm back.
I'll try and abbreviate a little bit if I can. So clearly, as we all know, that this deeply controversial proposal for high-density, high-rise development would require the removal of an important and precious covenant, and the developers clearly still appear to be of the view that they have a realistic chance of overturning the covenant, and along with it, the site's D1 status. But the actual process by which such a change of use might be granted seems rather opaque. At the last cabinet meeting, Councillor Ferry said, quote, that would have to be considered, were an application to be received, and then, quote, that would have to be considered by officers in Corporate Estates Department, and they would make a recommendation to cabinet, end quote. So from this, it's a little unclear whether it would then simply become an executive decision or whether it be put to a vote in the cabinet. Well, I'll abbreviate, and whether representations would be taken from any other body or individual at that stage, other than as far as residents are concerned, the somewhat anonymous officials of the Corporate Estates Department. So the question is, what is the democratically accountable process by which any decision on the covenant would be taken, and where does the buck stop? Okay, is it Adam? You're answering the question, Adam?
Thank you, Jonathan. Mr. Mayor, this actually comes under Councillor Ferry's portfolio, as he covers corporate estates, so I'll pass the question on to him.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. I'll reiterate what I said at the Cabinet meeting, that the Council has not received a request to vary the covenant. Under property law, that request has to be in writing. It cannot be done verbally. I'm not even aware that we've had a verbal request. The planning application, as the leader has said, is a completely separate item altogether. If we do get a request to vary the covenant, officers will then prepare a report setting out the options and advice for consideration by Cabinet at a public meeting. I'd just like to take up another point about what I said at the Cabinet meeting. Somebody mentioned a figure of $500,000 to release the covenant. I don't recognise that figure, but covenants are commercial assets. Had we sold the land without the covenant, then we would have received a much higher price for that land, and therefore any requirement to vary the covenant or indeed to lift the covenant comes at a price, and you would expect your council to achieve the highest possible consideration for that. But we're under no obligation to vary the covenant, and we're not even under an obligation to consider varying the covenant. As to another point that was said beforehand, I have been involved in property and planning for considerable, too many years, I'm afraid. I cannot understand why anybody would produce a detailed planning application for land which they know is covenanted for a particular use. So I can't give you any guidance on that whatsoever.
Thank you. Jonathan, have you got a supplement? Very quickly, please. We are running out of time.
Yeah, I'll try and be as quick as possible. I mean, the problem is, Councillor Ferry, thank you for your answer, but the problem is the length of the process already undertaken that causes such unease, the number of meetings between council officials and the developers, and the fact that the developers' agents, Daniel Watney LLP, are a large and combative city-based consultancy which doesn't behave without a strategy. And this is, I think, at the roots of many of the fears regarding the covenant, and why I feel that the lack of a really public statement on this from the council is so concerning, deeply concerning, because it creates the appearance there's been a lot of there have been a lot of meetings, but on these absolutely fundamental. Now, I just wanted to say finally, this is the covenant with the mayor's seal on it, printed in black and white. Sorry. And for a piece of council legalese, it's actually rather unambiguous. It does say the transferee hereby covenants so as to forever bind the land and the owners.
Jonathan, can you please ask the question?
The question is, Mr. Mayor, could you please reassure the voters that when the mayor's seal is put next to the word forever, it doesn't just mean about 23 years or until the price is right?
Keith, finally,
very quickly, I can assure you that we will take the residents' views into consideration when we're considering the covenant issue. We may even have a public consultation, although I know what the answer will be if we did have a public consultation. As for city lawyers and planning consultants, I can assure you that myself and my officers are well up to the task of taking anybody on.
Okay, well, thank you for your
answer. For coming. Thank you. Now we move on to item number 5. Item number 5, leader's announcement. Leader, please. You got 10 minutes to announce your announcement, please.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think our last council meeting was held on the 27th of February, where we set out a budget for this financial year, and within the report it set out that since 2015, as demand for services in Harrow has rapidly risen, our support grant from government has rapidly reduced. Our government grant to support council services had reduced by £52 million, which was 97%, and as a consequence, over the past 5 years, the burden of costs to residents paying for council services has gone from 51% to 77%, with most of our other funding coming from retention of part of the business rates collected and other fees and charges. Also at that meeting in February, as the coronavirus was spreading around the world, Councillor Adam Swirsky set out what the council had been and was doing to prepare for a health crisis in Harrow following the public health and resilience advice. As part of our public health and social care responsibilities, we needed to ensure that the council could deliver essential services, especially to vulnerable residents, in the event of significant staff absences or at the point there was an epidemic. The preparations also looked into the continuation of services in areas like waste collection, street cleaning, safety standards, emergency accommodation and schools, and building on business continuity plans to ensure already overloaded services could respond. And in early March, those plans started to be implemented. In the middle of March, the country was plunged into a crisis, the likes of which we have never seen before. When I was elected as a leader of this council in 2018, I said then that I had optimism and confidence because I know that when this council is united, when we utilise the many talents that we have within this chamber or virtually within the council and our partner organisations, when we're all working together, we can make a real difference to our citizens' lives. The past few months have presented some of the biggest challenges that many of us have ever faced in our lifetime, and I know it has not been easy. It has had a massive impact on all of our lives, our friends and our families, our mental health and our way of life. With the onset of the crisis, we were required to stand up services that just didn't exist previously, and we have had to deliver many of our services in a totally different way. As a Labour-run council, our number one priority has been to protect and support our most vulnerable residents during this difficult period. We ensured that we got the homeless off the streets and into safe accommodation, and rapidly stepped up and created new services to support the vulnerable and those most in need whilst they were self-isolating. The concept of shielding to this extent had never been used to this level before. Overnight, staff were working remotely, community hubs being introduced. By the end of May, there was nearly 13,000 Harrow residents on our shielded list, so having to make contact with them with over 22,000 outbound calls made. We ensured that our waste collection services were maintained, our streets kept clean, our parks kept open, hot meals delivered, food supplied, timely discharges from the hospitals, PPE supplied, and so much more. How the council responded has been set out in 3 cabinet reports, and when reading those reports again whilst preparing for this meeting, I am both moved and humbled by the amazing work done to protect our residents in Harrow. I've always said that the staff are the lifeblood of the organisation, and I am proud of the commitment that staff put in to get the work done. We will have the opportunity later on this agenda tonight to record our formal thanks for their tremendous work over the past few months. But I'd just like to, at the beginning of this meeting, we had 1 minute silence. And the reason was this virus hit the Harrow community very hard. Over the past few months, 1,290 residents had tested positive for COVID-19, and 397 Harrow residents have died after testing positive for COVID-19. 397 lives tragically lost. We have family members who have not been able to mourn, who are struggling to come to terms with their grief. And also the consequence of an extended period of lockdown on the health and well-being of our community, particularly on those who are already vulnerable and struggling with health and loneliness. From the Public Health England reports, we have seen that the impact of COVID-19 has replicated existing health inequalities and in some cases increased them. The largest disparity is by age. The risk of dying amongst those diagnosed with COVID-19 was higher in males than females, higher in those living in the more deprived areas than those living in the least deprived, and higher in those in Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups than in white ethnic groups. COVID-19 didn't cause inequality, it shone a spotlight on inequality. I have to say there was a massive vacuum left by government during this crisis. Due to austerity, we entered this crisis with our finances and a number of services already under massive pressure, and still our staff rapidly responded to the COVID-19 crisis, doing everything they could. They were supported by the government minister's clear promises that whatever funding is needed for councils to get through this and come out the other side. There will be a debate about whether this additional funding support is enough. From my perspective, it just doesn't look like it. The real problem is that we are plugging gaps rather than getting ahead of the situation. And as we rebuild services and prepare for an anticipated second wave, we still have no settled, sustainable long-term plan for funding local government and vacillation from the government as to what the role and function of local government really is. We have kept our side of the bargain to do whatever it takes, but the government have not. Government can and should do more to help local authorities deal with this crisis, and we will continue to call on the government to stand by what they said, to fulfil their promise of whatever funding is needed to properly fund public services. I would like to briefly touch upon moving forwards and recovery, and quite frankly, there are significant challenges coming our way. It is clear that adult social care is likely to be in emergency mode for some time. Most other services are stable, and as lockdown is reduced, the council will start to move them back to normality. We're also ensuring a major short-term economic shock to businesses and residents, and we're working on how we can best support those businesses and residents through that. Our public health team are closely monitoring the daily reports, ever vigilant of signs of local outbreak. We are seeing waves of need emerging in terms of mental health associated with grief, loss and bereavement, as well as more acute suicidal and self-harm presentations. Our staff are expecting more of this pent-up social and emotional need to emerge alongside other chronic health needs over the next few months. from the Public Health England report, which sets out the stark challenges of reducing gaps in life expectancy between different sectors of our society, now exacerbated by COVID-19. We're also seeing increased contacts and approaches to our housing services about longer-term concerns of homelessness due to financial pressures, of reduced income or unemployment, and the inability to pay some or all of the rent. The current support schemes do not meet all rent payments for families with slightly higher incomes whose rent is above the housing benefit levels. The council officers are trying to work with families now to find solutions and help meet rent shortfalls to ensure they can reduce the anticipated enormous surge in evictions when the restrictions lifted in late August. We're also seeing quickly increasing numbers of people unemployed, which is on top of the 30,000 Harrow residents who are currently furloughed, with risk that all of them will return to work when the furlough schemes end. None of this is unique to Harrow, however, we're not standing still. It's clear that there is still a long road ahead before life returns to normal with unprecedented financial challenges, and this administration will continue to work with members, voluntary and community organisations and our residents and businesses as we start to rebuild a cohesive and stronger society in Harrow. We can't do this on our own, so we're already working with our partners across the public sector and neighbouring boroughs to support each other for a possible and significant economic downturn, and that has been detailed in the recent cabinet reports. We don't want to return to normal, we want to return to better. This is really important to us. Is able to live with healthy lives, achieving to the best of their ability, whilst we protect and restore the environment, preserving the planet for future generations. We will be focusing our recovery in Harrow around the priorities that we set out earlier in the draft borough plan, which we are delighted our partners are very supportive of. This leaders' report is about the council, but I would like to do a shout out to our wider voluntary and community sectors. Throughout the pandemic, we have seen many amazing people across the borough who quickly responded to the pandemic from supporting neighbours and ensuring they are okay. So please take the opportunity to nominate them through the council website by the 31st of July. To finish, Mr. Mayor, I would like to say that I hope there will be more recognition of the vital role public services play in the lives of the people we serve and the dedication and commitment of those who carry out this essential work. We are a wonderfully diverse community, and we have seen people from different faiths and communities coming together and supporting our most vulnerable people throughout this pandemic. It is this strength, cohesion and compassion that will make Harrow a better place for all residents in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader, for completing time. Any question to the Leader? I think it's Paul. Paul, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I have to say, since the last time we met, it's been quite a while. I didn't think that stage, the next few months would be quite as devastating as they had been for so many people. I didn't think that we'd all be trapped in our homes for so many months. I didn't think that I would be stuck in my home for a number of months. I didn't think we'd be next meeting virtually. And Mr. Mayor, frankly, I didn't think that you would still be mayor at this time of the year. So a lot has happened and a lot has gone on. And I know we're going to speak later on about the work the staff have done and how impressive that has been. And I just want to add to what the Leader has said, but I'll say more about that later on. But I noticed that the one thing that hasn't changed is the rhetoric that comes from the Leader of the council. And in some ways, I suppose that's reassuring that we're back to politics as normal, and this crisis hasn't changed that. But I note that in his criticism of the government, he didn't mention the business grant scheme that the council's slow on, but eventually managed to deliver. He didn't mention the generous furlough programme that the government has put in place to try and protect jobs. He didn't mention the business rates relief that the government has provided to so many businesses, keeping them in power. Instead, he went back to the same old thing that we heard in the budget debate. And the other thing, Mr. Mayor, that hasn't changed is the inability to give a straight answer to a straight question. So I want to ask him, and just to go back to that debate on 256 Ridgeway, we know what is proposed for that site. There is a planning application that sets out what the Brethren are proposing for that site. We don't need to wait for them to ask to lift the covenant. We know what they want to do. Can we save everyone time, effort and money by writing to the Brethren, the owners of the site, and tell them we will not lift that covenant? I think the residents are incredibly concerned when people start talking about commercial assets and the price we might do and the due consideration. that ultimately the council will be bought off by that. And you have the opportunity now to say that you won't, and that you will write to the owners of that site saying you will not release the covenant that the council has, and then all the residents who've signed that petition can sleep easier tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Leader, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a totally different view about the government because they made lots of announcements and never supported those promises. They've been very disingenuous for making grand announcements and grand statements, and then the guidance comes through many weeks later. We were quite right, and you've asked this question before about business grants, that we've done it prudently and correctly with the small team that we had available to do so, and they were paid correctly. We made sure the right checks have been in place. If we had your way, I suppose we'd have paid them all out, and now we'd be trying to get it all back again because they've been incorrectly paid. But going to the planning application, I've made it quite clear that there are two separate issues here. The Reverend, when they last asked, will we remove the covenant, the answer was no. They've still put in a planning application, knowing that part of it, and they're entitled to put in a planning application because that is what the legislation allows them to do so. I've made it quite clear that we're minded not to remove the covenant on that site, but that doesn't stop the application from going through. And I go back to the person who asked the public question, the last public question, when they said about these companies that set up and spend thousands of pounds challenging councils and places to force these applications through. And I think we've just made it quite clear we're not removing the covenant, but we need to change the planning legislation to allow us to be able to do things in a better way.
Thank you, Leader. Entry, Mr. Mayor, if I can, is I would just like the council to be proactive instead of reactive on this. You are quite capable of writing to the owner of the site, informing them of the covenant and the council's position on it, which might put all this to bed because they will withdraw the planning application if they know there's no point to it. The fact that this is going on is because the council is equivocating around this rather than giving a clear and definitive answer that the residents of Harrow need.
They know our previous stance on the covenants and they've still submitted a plan application.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Marilyn, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Leader. I'm going to change the subject a little, but before I do, I have to take issue with something you said about us paying out the business grant. We were one of the slowest in the country. And not at any time did Councillor Osborne or myself or any member of my group suggest that you just give the money away without doing any due diligence. And you know that's true. It's just that we were terribly slow and people were really struggling and it was absolutely awful. And that's the truth. But I want to talk about street space because I think this is something that is going to start to become a lot more of a problem for people when they begin to realise what is in store for them. Now, of course, we all accept that we're living in uncharted territory, that the COVID legislation has eased up some of the statutory regulations and things that we have to do in order to make changes to the highway, and I accept that is the case. But we also have our own rules and regulations, and we have our own constitution in Harrow. And I am very concerned that we are being incredibly high-handed about this. I had a very helpful, but nonetheless didn't achieve very much meeting with two of the senior officers tasked with putting through these street space proposals. And I got the distinct impression that it didn't matter at all what anyone said. They were all going ahead, unless, of course, unless we can all live in hope that the portfolio holder will use more common sense and actually rein in the excesses of her own officers and put a stop to some of this nonsense. The problem is if we close too many roads, particularly roads that are not suitable for cycling and for exercise because they're so steep, what we're going to do is we're going to cause massive problems in the main roads and there'll be lots of traffic jams. If we take away loads of parking on local parades we're going to end up with all sorts of problems with businesses that can't survive. I won't go into too many details about it for these purposes, but we have been contacted by people now when they realise the horror of what exactly the council has in store for them. They are incredibly upset, and I think we'll find a lot more people when they realise what we're up to, or not us, but the council is up to, your administration is up to, Leader. They will be very displeased. So I put it to you, and I really genuinely would like a favourable answer. Will you please reconsider some of these road closures? And will you please listen to people? And where there is a lot of comments that are coming in now on the website, will you take them on board and stop doing these things, especially closing the roads, and also where we have no parking for struggling businesses? Thank you.
Leader, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we talk about business rates, we paid them out quicker than Hillingdon. So when you compare us regularly with Hillingdon, we paid them out a lot quicker.
You didn't.
With street space, I just want you to get to a particular point. When our LIP fund, our street safety programme was paid through the LIP funding, which comes from TfL, and because of the bailouts didn't come through with that money, we've lost all our road safety payments and funding. A few months ago, the government announced they were advancing some funding around roads, specifically to make it safer for pedestrians and cyclists on the highway. They gave us less than a week to put this in applications in, and they were tested. Not us making that decision. They tested it to make sure that it met the requirements of the street space scheme. We've been consulting some of this through the portals that have been announced. And you've been fully briefed on this, Marilyn, so I'm surprised you're asking the question, because it was quite clear when it was set out, and you've been regularly briefed, and this briefing has gone to all councillors, and so everyone's on the same story here, that the applications were sent in, they were assessed against the government guidance about increasing the road safety for cyclists and pedestrians, and those schemes that were submitted were based around discussions that had taken place over the years through the TARSAP meeting, through our cycling strategy, through our open space strategy and our environment strategy. All of those strategies have been listed in why we've put those proposals forward. The whole understanding of it all is to make it safer for the increasing number of cyclists on the road, and that is what the proposals have done, and that's what's being consulted on.
Thank you, Leader. The time is up for the question.
Question, please, Mr. Mayor.
I think very quickly, Marilyn.
Well, I would like a supplemental question. It's because I have been briefed that I am extremely concerned. It's because I've read everything and understood what you're planning as an administration. I'm very worried about it. It's because of that. It is the council's choice under your leadership to close the roads that you have chosen. There is no question about that. It's your choice. You can't start blaming other people for it. I put it to you one more time. Will you please reconsider some of these proposals in the event that it causes such an uproar? And please, where you've put them in and they're causing a lot of hardship to local businesses, will you please consider taking them away instead of being high-handed?
Leader, quickly, please.
Thank you, Marilyn. I would say it again. The proposals are there to improve road safety for cyclists and pedestrians. They've been they've been sent off to the Department of Transport and TfL, where they've been assessed, and quite a few of the proposals that were sent in were turned down. And we haven't got the funding for some major schemes that we previously had sight of before this outbreak took place. So they're out to consultation. Some might not go ahead, but others will, because the underlying process priority amongst this is to make it safer for cyclists on the roadways. Thank you,
Leader. Unfortunately, there is no more time left. I think, Marilyn, I think I'm giving enough time. I'm sorry, Marilyn. Time is up, and unfortunately, there are other 4 people wanted to say, but I can't allow it. We're going to item number 7 on the summons. Recruitment of senior management role. Can I ask Councillor Graham Henson to move the recommendation at item number 7, please.
I formally move the recommendations, Mr. Mayor, but I would just like to say, as a comment, throughout the pandemic, Sean Harris did come into the council as an interim, on a temporary contract as the chief executive, and it would have gone out to applications to recruit a permanent chief exec sometime this year. The pandemic has changed all our outlook on that, and we've asked to extend it for 2 years. But I would say, put on record my thanks to Sean, because a lot of his experience came into as a previous chief exec in other places, has allowed us to sort of manage some of the COVID-19 response a lot quicker than we have done in the past around a number of things that when they've gone wrong. So I formally move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I have the seconder, please? Is it Paul? Paul, can you please second? You need to unmute yourself.
I'm not sure I'm seconding it, Mr. Mayor, but I don't disagree with it. I just want to say that obviously now I don't think is the time for us to be changing our senior leadership. And I'm grateful that this is extended until September 2022, which will give us the chance when we take control of the council to review the senior management of the council and put in place what we regard as an effective leadership. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is that recommendation agreed? Labour Group, please.
Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you. That is carried. Thank you. Item number 8, information report. Can we note the report, please?
No, agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Item number 9, information report, decision taken urgent. Can we note the report, please?
Noted.
Noted.
Thank you. There are no councillor questions, so we'll move on item number 11, motions. There are 3 notified motions before us this evening. We will have one debate on motion number 1 and number 2. Motion number 1 is can I call Councillor Ashton, Marilyn Ashton, to move the motion number 1, please? Marilyn, you've got 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I was given to understand that we were going to be discussing these motions in tandem. Is that correct? Before I start?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it will be discussed together. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Well, Mr. Mayor, that rather changes the way, frankly, that I would have wanted to propose the motion. For these purposes, I suppose we could call it the Ashton motion, and the other motion, the Świerski motion, so we know which one we're talking about. Mr. Mayor, we all agree that we want to make life better for our citizens, and of that there is no doubt. However, the, shall we say, Świerski motion seeks to score points and is full of innuendo. And although in part it does make worthy suggestions, it also makes recommendations like abolishing all white panels and committees. And frankly, I do find this rather questionable in that, for starters, we couldn't really hold the Chief Officers panel since the membership on the Labour side is at the moment all white males, and on our side, well, at least there's a gender balance, and I don't know if you've noticed it, but I happen not to be a man. So that at least is something. But the problem here, and frankly is demonstrated by the other motion about exactly the same subject, is that unfortunately the Black Lives Matter UK organisation has been hijacked by the far left of the Labour Party and includes some damaging suggestions like defunding the police, which besides its obvious absurdity would actually have a terrible effect on the black community, who are more likely to be victims of crime. By using the hardships of those who are victims of discrimination and inequality to further their own brand of political ideology, far left of the Labour Party is undermining and diminishing the prospect of solving the problems encountered by people from black communities, thereby reducing the likelihood that they're climbing up the ladder and achieving successful careers and a fruitful and productive life. Mr. Mayor, 70 years ago, my late father-in-law was unable to earn a living as a stock taker because of being Jewish. He was unable to provide for his family and to put food on the table for his wife and only child, David. So he changed their family name from Abrahams to Ashton and found that doors opened up for him that were previously firmly shut. This was clearly a case of anti-Semitism and prejudice against Jews that was so prevalent in those days, and it was a long time ago. And look how far we've come, apart from, of course, the shocking problems within the Labour Party, which Keir Starmer is trying his best to sort out, which is not an easy task. The point about this is that it is by education and teaching our youngsters to integrate and aspire to greater things that is the way to remedy these terrible injustices. Not using the plight of those who suffer from discrimination as a means of furthering one's own political views and scoring points by finger pointing and creating an unhelpful blame culture that is so prevalent in certain parts of the Labour Party as it stands. Had I intended to say this in the way that I've said it before reading the Swirsky motion, the answer is no, Mr. Mayor. However, it has come as a stark reminder of what is so wrong with certain elements within the Labour movement, an ideology that was roundly rejected by the good people.
1 minute left.
Red Wall. We must stand shoulder to shoulder against all forms of prejudice and racism and give all our citizens a chance in life to get on and fulfil their true potential. Levelling up, Mr. Mayor. So I hope that everyone will support the, shall we say, Ashton motion and resolve to press on with educating people who see merit in people and look past their colour, religion and ethnicity. Let's stand shoulder to shoulder with the black communities in this great nation of ours and all other communities and resolve that we can improve their lives and that of all our citizens for the better. And thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Marilyn. Can I ask Jean Lemmyman to second the motion, please? Jean, are you there? Thank you, Jean.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you. Yeah, you've got 3 minutes.
I've got headphones on, so excuse me if I shout a bit.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this from my shadow portfolio perspective, which I know Sue would share in terms of community cohesion. And what concerns me is the disruption and the rifts that have been caused in the way that people have been supporting the various protests at the moment. And what I would like to talk about is how we can heal and move on. The first thing is I'd just like to say how many of us here today are trustees, school governors, or members of community groups. I imagine virtually everyone around in this meeting are doing something like that. And if we think of what we can do to change this from a tragic moment, that is, say, George Floyd's murder, to a movement to protect equalities in general. That was a quote I had from a colleague who is a black manager in the Ministry of Justice. We spoke, and this, I'll give you an example. I'm a trustee of a number of organisations like everyone else is, and one organisation I've already been working with is around trying to change the organisation's approach, etc. And I'll just read you one bit of the final bit that we've agreed. And this is about we are challenging ourselves to reflect on whether we as individuals and as a community are doing enough to eradicate racism. Everyone deserves an opportunity and a future, and that cannot happen in a world where racism remains. That is that was been put forward at the trustee. And finally, I would say, in terms of us, we have a great advantage here of being community leaders. We have a great advantage here of encouraging communities which we influence to be cohesive. It's very, very positive opportunity to us, especially in Harrow. We should also show compassion because there are rifts developing around different communities, and it's up to us to build those links and enable that to heal if it needs to, and develop if we can and when we can. And finally, if I may say, Mr. Mayor, we need to all show our Harrow community some courage to make this happen and not let just things go past. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks very much. Now, motion number 2. Adam, I believe you want to speak for 3 minutes and Angela for 5 minutes. Am I right, Adam?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Can you please propose the motion, please?
Certainly. Mr. Mayor, I wanted to start my remarks with a quote from Martin Luther King, not the most famous one, but actually a different quote, where he says, I must confess that over the last few years, I've been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. The white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. I realized in the wake of George Floyd's murder that I have been guilty of the lukewarm acceptance that Martin Luther King spoke about. Too long contented by the successes of the anti-racism movement to date, and too little concerned about how far we have to go to achieve genuine racial equality. Mr. Mayor, there is a real debate here tonight, and I believe that the Conservative motion is put forward with the best of intentions, but it is a motion that fundamentally misses the point about the daily lived experiences of Black people and people from ethnic minorities, about the responsibilities that white people in positions of power have to listen, to learn, and to take strong action to correct the deep injustices that run through our society. And that's why I, as a white person, wanted to put this motion forward, because I recognize the advantages my race has given me, not least as someone born in South Africa. And I recognize the responsibilities of my position in this council and in the cabinet to take action. So I'm asking council to support my and Councillor Murphy-Strachan's motion tonight, because it highlights our repeated failures as a society to address racial inequalities. It calls on government not just to launch a new race commission, which they've done today, but to implement the recommendations from the many commissions of the past, the Lammy report, the Angelini review, the Windrush review, the McGregor-Smith review, the Lawrence review, and the Marmot review. And it outlines a set of activities that the council can get on with as a matter of urgency to listen, learn, and act to tackle racial inequalities. Officers have already made a start, but I'm asking council to give this motion its full endorsement to show the strength of our support. Some have said to me that this motion is insufficient because it doesn't speak to the depths of inequality that people from ethnic minority communities face. Overcrowded housing, hostile immigration, punitive welfare system, racial biased work, and much more. I recognise those concerns, and my passion to tackle inequality lies at the heart of why I'm Labour. So I'm not asking that we set those concerns aside. I accept the flaws of this motion. It isn't perfect, but I do believe that it's a positive start. Let's back this motion. Let's move from words to listening, learning, and acting. And let's make sure that Black lives really matter. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you. Angela, you got 5 minutes to speak on the motion, please. Angela?
Angela?
Yes,
okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll start by saying enough is enough. That's a cry of Black people all over the world. It's time for real, meaningful and enduring change. It's time to eradicate the entrenched racism and inequality that permeates every level of our society, placing Black people at enormous disadvantage in areas such as employment, education, housing, criminal justice system, healthcare, and the glaring inequalities exposed by the disproportionate number of BAME people dying from COVID-19. And of course, the fact that Black women are 5 times more likely to die during childbirth than their white counterparts. It's time to root out the canker that has blighted fairness in our society. In the midst of a global pandemic, the murder of George Floyd saw people of all ethnicities joining in the worldwide protest demanding equality and justice by standing in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. The statistics speak for themselves. 40 times more likely to be stopped and searched. During the lockdown, the Met Police carried out 22,000 searches on young Black men, and that equates to 30% of males in London. Black children are 3 times more likely to be excluded from school, placing them at risk of being caught up in the counter lines and ruining any chance they have of a decent future. Belly Mujinga died after being spat on in her face and contracting COVID-19. At the same time, George Crean White received a custodial sentence after spitting at a policeman at around the same time. Belly Mujinga's Black life did not matter enough. Racism is embedded in the individual psyche. We must recognize that nothing will change if individuals are not willing to change and confront their own racial biases. Those who hide behind the veils of subtle microaggressions, such as "my best friend is Black, I'm not racist, I don't see color, you are so articulate," must seriously re-examine their stance on racism and consider what needs to be done to become anti-racist. It's not enough to be non-racist. In calling on the government to incorporate the teaching of Black history in the national curriculum at all key stages, this motion recognizes that education, particularly in the early stages, is crucial in eliminating discrimination in the long run. The government must now implement the recommendations of the Lama Review and the further 5 reviews Councillor Swirsky referred to. Now, adding insult to injury, victims of the Windrush scandal are now being required to prove their right to compensation. It is for the government to prove that they do not have a right to compensation. Of the 6 people who got compensation, Herman Campbell was offered a derisory £250 after being denied re-entry into the UK after holidaying abroad. This motion promises real action. It sets out very clear, concrete steps to be taken both immediately and in the long term to dismantle the structural inequalities in Hull Council and the wider community. The daily lived experiences of BAME people subject to systemic racism is mentally and physically exhausting, and is a huge barrier to genuine inclusiveness, diversity, and progress. I second this motion.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you very much. There are a few members who have already indicated they want to speak, so I'll start with Leslie Lewinson, please. Councillor Leslie Lewinson. Is she around? Thank you. There you go. Floor is yours.
Okay.
You've got 3 minutes.
Okay. Since the despicable and inhumane murder of George Floyd in America on the 25th of May 2020, the world responded with unprecedented outrage and demonstrations to this tragedy. In addition, there is a resurgence of the Black Lives Matter cause. As a Black person growing up in the UK from the age of 8 years old, I have first-hand experience of overt and covert prejudice, racism and discrimination, whether from individuals around me or through various organisations, even my career in the health service. But I've developed a thick skin. My father, now 97, was an invited immigrant from Jamaica and part of the Windrush era. He can still recount painful experiences of racism, prejudice and discrimination in the UK, the mother country. He left a comfortable life in Jamaica for further opportunities and the quest of helping to rebuild this country after the war. However, it was more like a nightmare for him and many others. So it became a case of self-preservation as they made the best of difficult situations to survive. Recently, the arrival of the Windrush immigrants in 1948 was commemorated, but there is little to celebrate. In some of their descendants are still experiencing unfair treatment in terms of their rights as British citizens. We hope that this matter will be resolved soon. We've had enough reviews and reports. The matter concerning racism and discrimination of Black people and indeed the wider BMA community. It is high time that we moved from rhetoric to taking more positive action to address the stark inequalities that exist for BAME people. Many of our people put up in silence.
1 minute left, please.
While some youngsters unwisely choose to kick off and behave in some way badly, which is not helpful. But positive action must start at the grassroots up. With local organisations making changes to diminish inequalities, for example, removing the glass ceiling that blocks opportunity and promotion in work environments. Also, we need to encourage more BAME individuals to take a seat at the table and participate in the decision-making process in our communities. Harrow is a good place to be. There are many positive things in our area, but it is hoped that going forward, the borough will grasp this timely opportunity, stand together, and be a vanguard for significant constructive change in issues relating to Black Lives Matter, as well as the wider BAME community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, well in time. Thank you very much. Next one is Sachin Shah. Sachin. Thank you, Sachin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are times in life when you're at a turning point. Times when the time for stopping talking and start taking action. Times when lives can be changed. Now is that time, and how is this motion? Now there'll be those that say this motion does not go far enough or does not do it quick enough. I am actually one of those people. But we should never, ever, ever say that just because we can't do everything, we should do nothing. This motion is a start, and that's exactly what it should be. Now, I know Adam and Angela have put a lot of work into this, and I want to congratulate them on bringing it forward. Both of them, I'm sure, will agree with me. There is more to be done, and today is just the start of the journey. Now, let's compare the Labour motion to the Tory motion. Labour's motion of action versus the Tory motion of inaction. Labour's motion has 477 words on action. How many words of action do the Tory motion have? 0. Labour's motion has 29 policy recommendations. How many does the Tories have? 0. Labour's motion has specific things this council can do to make a difference. How many does the Tories have? 0. The Tory motion is shambolic and it's just an embarrassment. And this shows why Labour motion is so important. It's an important issue that needs serious people to take serious action in a serious way. Labour's motion is serious and a thoughtful set of actions. Labour's motion takes the matter seriously, and Labour's motion promises action immediately. It's time for the talking to end and action to begin. I said at the start, this motion is a journey, and we all know that every journey starts with one step. With this motion, we haven't taken the first step. We've made one giant leap. It's time to get serious. It's time to act. It's time to vote for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sachin. Next one is Richard Almond. Richard, please. Richard? Okay, there you go.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Yes, start. 3 minutes now. Thank you, Richard.
I support motion 1, which is measured and sensible. I oppose motion 2, which is the very reverse. Black Lives Matter. That's a statement that no civilised person would possibly disagree with. But the Labour motion calls on us to support the Black Lives Matter movement. Martin Luther King, quoted by Councillor Swirsky, was a Christian minister, and he would not have agreed with this at all, that we should disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family. Just think how much damage that would do to our society if it were implemented. That is in the manifesto of the Black Lives Matter movement. Any organisation that has that as one of its principal aims is dangerous, and we should run a mile, if not 100 miles from it, not give it our support at all. Second, Councillor Shah says it's a time for action, not for
I think, Richard, you mute yourself by mistake. You mute yourself. Can you, yeah, let's start again, please. Just last bit. Oh, you muted again. Richard, unmute yourself, please.
Right. I'm
Yeah,
sorry
carry
about
on.
that.
Just conclude it now, please.
Panels, it's within your control completely, as Councillor Ashton said earlier on, to control who goes on the Chief Officer's employment panels. Your leadership's all male and white, but Councillor Swirsky said he was very affected by the killing of George Floyd. 3 weeks after the killing of Mr. Floyd, he sat on that panel. If he wanted to put into action rather than into words what he felt as a result of that, he could have withdrawn from that panel, given it some balance, given one of his colleagues, for example, Councillor Palmer, who would have had the added value of being a woman as well as a member of an ethnic minority. Things are within your control. You don't have to bring a virtue signalling motion to do them. Get on and do them now, and then come back and tell us about it rather than preaching a sermon at us, as you so often do.
1 minute left. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you. Karima, please. Karima. Karima. Yes, please. Thank you. 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, every lives matter. However, the topic is Black Lives Matters. First, I want to thank the leader of the council and the leader of all the officers honoring the Black Lives Matter, lighting up the council. Thank you, officers. Thank you, leader. The council display all forms of racism and discrimination. I urge people of all political views to stand together, shoulder to shoulder, bring about fairness, society, where everyone is, regardless of their ethnicity. I would like to say 2 stories. One is Anthony Joshua, the world heavyweight boxer, on the 7th, the Sun said, when I do the wrestling, don't recognize that. But when a person keeps a knee in the neck and say, I can't breathe, recognize that. And I'm a little story about my own son. I'm not going to quote because I have little men. My colleague said that police, young people are attacked very quickly. It is true. I was picked up after working in the night by my son. 2 police officers in space of 100 miles per space was followed by officers. One stopped. My son said, Mom, that police officer is going to stop me. I said, for what? You just picked me up. Don't worry, listen, tape me. I did. When I was going to tape it, I was flashing. The police officer was very aggressive. My son was very polite, saying, okay, officer, and the police left. He came in, and then 100 yards away, close upon to my house. And again, another police officer was behind, and he was stopped. He said, Mom, that police officer is going to stop. I said, for what? And this time I'm going to speak.
1 minute left, Rima.
And he was stopped, and he was questioned. And the thing is, when he was stopped, I said, look, officer, I work at this place in this unit, and you officers come here. Oh, thank you for working for the frontline services. And he said, sorry for stopping, and he went. Why? Because my son said, it's because I'm black. I think ethnic minority people, I am a black person. I categorize as myself black ethnic minority. In Miami, 1 year, Black History Month is recognized. I think I urge the council and the council officers to take it further in the curriculum, recognizing the black ethnic minority in the curriculum, and enjoy the culture and the people in their life. And regardless their color, don't discriminate. I do suffer with discrimination and racism internally and silently, but I keep my chin up.
Please conclude it.
And I'm telling you, Mr. Mayor, I asked the council to get a motion, and this motion to be recognized, valued, and given both the motions are Fair enough. They're talking about blacklisting one. I'm not talking generally saying one is good and one is bad. We need to recognize black ethnic.
Thank you. Karima, please.
Minority. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to talk.
Thank you. Kiran is next, please. Kiran. There you go, Kiran. Carry on.
Thank you.
3 minutes.
Thank you. Black Lives Matter. 3 words. 3 crucial words that are missing from the Tory motion this evening. 3 words that sum up why we need action and why we need it now. This evening gives us an opportunity to focus on the black community and put in motion the wheels of real change. We don't spend enough time in this council talking about the black community, which is why I'm so disappointed that the Tory motion doesn't even refer to black people. And their response this evening is quite frankly insulting to everyone in Harrow. Black people are worse off when it comes to employment, housing, education, across the board. Black pupils are more likely to be excluded from school, 4 times more likely to die from COVID, and they're more likely to be stopped by the police, as we saw in the United States, murdered time and again for the colour of their skin. This is systemic and persistent racism, and it has to stop. It's great to stand in solidarity with our communities, to light up the Civic Centre, to review statues. All of that is definitely needed, but we have to do more, much more. And we can start now with what is under our control. So starting with a review of our own services and policies, driving out systemic racism wherever we find it, and addressing our workforce representation and our councillor representation. We're excluding communities from the decision-making process, and that is wrong. And that's why we need to make sure that all our panels and all our committees, particularly the decision-making ones, are diverse. Never again should we have an all-male or an all-white panel or committee in this council again. And if it happens that you are a white councillor that is down to attend an all-white or an all-male committee, don't do it. We need everyone to take a stand and play their part in change. We must take every single recommendation in the Labour motion seriously and follow up on progress. And as chair of the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee, I pledge to play my part. And I hope that every councillor, every director and manager in the council does the same. There are only a few moments in history where we have the momentum to achieve real change. We have that momentum right now. Please, let's not waste it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Kiran. Next one is Kaimana. Kiran, unmute yourself, please. Sorry, mute yourself, Kiran. Yeah. Kaimana, carry on.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Carry on.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be speaking primarily on the issue of Black Lives Matter as put forward by the Labour Group. Whilst I understand the Labour motion covers a number of issues to do with ways to further equality and diversity at Harrow Council, I would like to focus my comments in general on the Black Lives Matter movement and why it's important to stand with Black people. Firstly, I would like to open my remarks by offering my deepest condolences to the families of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor and Tony McDade, who were killed by police over the last few months in the United States. It is these deaths in police custody that sparked a new wave of Black Lives Matter protests across the globe and have allowed us in many different countries, including here at home, to take action and reflect on the treatment of our Black brothers and sisters. My speaking on this motion tonight is primarily to speak as an ally with Black people across the United Kingdom, the United States and across the globe. I know that the discrimination I face as a young woman, as a Muslim, as a refugee and an Afghan cannot and should never be compared to the discrimination that Black people face in our country. I know many people feel uncomfortable about Black Lives Matter. This is quite clear by the statements made by the Conservative side tonight. Many people feel that this movement is about putting Black lives ahead of white lives or brown lives. On the contrary, the Black Lives Matter movement is fundamentally about equality for all people, with the specific caveat and understanding that Black people are not treated equally in our society today, and that they have not been treated with the dignity and the respect that they deserve and have deserved as human beings in the past. How can we forget that Black people were forcefully colonized and taken from their homes, their lands, and put on crammed boats and sold? Yes, sold into being the property of another human being. Their names were changed, their languages removed, their religions forcefully changed. I guess many people here would say, but we didn't take part in that. What does that have to do with us? The truth is, our systems today are built on the systems and the policies of the past. It means that up until 2015, the British taxpayer was paying compensation to the families of slave owners. It means that in our national curriculum, we fail to mention the history of colonialism or of slavery. It means that Black people are 40 times more likely to be stopped and searched by police. Black people experience 12% of force incidents in the UK. Black people are more representative in the prison system than any other race in the UK. Black and ethnic minority people are more likely to die from COVID-19. This needs to change. We must demand action. We must stand with Black people for justice and equality. I'm proud that it is my party, the Labour Party, that has called for concrete actions to be taken by the government. This means implementing the recommendations of the Lammy report, acting on the report published by Public Health England, looking into the impact of COVID-19 on Black and ethnic minority groups, acting on the damning report into the Windrush scandal so that Black citizens that were impacted by this can get the justice they deserve. We need to stand together to address these inequalities facing Black people in the UK. We must raise our voice and demand justice. As the great Malcolm X said about the Black movement for equality, we declare our right on this earth to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the right of a human being in this society, this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes all the discussion on these motions. Now, Marilyn, do you want to reply on your motion, please? Thank you. 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, interestingly, I actually felt that the contributions by Sachin and Kiran kind of proves the point that I was trying to make in relation to the motion, the Twersky motion. I'd like to try and get away from saying Labour motion and Conservative motion, because, you know, this motion that I wrote, which refers to the death of George Floyd, which is very significant, was something that I felt very strongly about. And of course, at that time when I wrote it, I wasn't privy, or I'm not psychic, but I wouldn't know about the Twersky motion. And I don't see anything in it that could possibly cause anyone to quibble. But of course, that would be the case. And the reason why I'm raising the issue of what Councillor Shah and Councillor Rashamdani has said is that, in actual fact, that is exactly the problem with this. It's this way of describing your credentials, as it were, as to how you feel about injustice, how you feel about racism, how you feel about hate crime to do with transgender or disability or Islamophobia or homophobia and all sorts of things, and anti-Semitism, how you feel about all these things, and the fact that Black people are terribly badly discriminated against. Of course, all those things are, in their eyes, the property and the belongings of the Labour movement. They can't accept the fact, you see. In fact, I'd go as far to say it slightly needles some of the people here tonight, not on obviously on our side, that a Conservative councillor, namely me, took the initiative.
Left Berlin.
Yes, I know. Took the initiative to propose what is a balanced and genuine and heartfelt motion. I think it's very disappointing. I half expected that to be the case, irrespective of anything that I could have said. And I just put it to the council that we're going to have to try and get away from this hijacking of a very worthy cause by a political party in this country, because it will not help that cause. And if anything, it could set it back. And I just think that it's unfortunate, shall we say, the approach that's been taken by certain of the speakers. But I do hope that everybody can vote for our motion or my motion. I'm proud to have proposed it. I can't think of anything about it that could cause any kind of problem for anyone. And I therefore do hope that it is carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Berlin. Now, Adam, do you want to have a right to reply on the second motion, please, Adam?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I will come in. I just wanted to check if Angela wanted to respond to the debate. Otherwise, I'm happy to.
It's 3 minutes, so between you two, what do you want to do?
I'll kick off, and if Angela wants to come in and just drop in. So I think, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to all those who spoke. I think it has been a genuinely helpful debate because it exposes that there is a debate. Sometimes in this council, we put forward motions that everyone can agree on, and we all just say how fantastic it is. And I think actually Marilyn's motion very much fits that bill, and I'm happy to support it. There's nothing bad about the motion. It says perfectly sensible things that I think almost everyone in the whole country would. You'd be hard pressed to find someone who could disagree with it. The issue here is that that's just not the issue that we are trying to address tonight. And there is a genuine difference between those who would make polite nods to the fact that, you know, someone in America died and it was terribly tragic, and you know, it would be better if bad things didn't happen in the world. To those who recognise, and I understand it's not easy to recognise this, just how deep the problem is in our society, and just how impacted so many members of our community are, and of course Harrow as an incredibly diverse borough. And Councillor Almond's right. I did sit on that Chief Officer's Employment Panel, and actually I looked around and saw that we were all white councillors appointing 2 white senior officers, and I thought this is wrong. And that's one of the things that made me feel that we need to put this in writing, that this is not the way that we should be conducting ourselves in future. So look, you know, it is a shame that we can't have consensus across both motions tonight. I think unfortunately the Conservative side is missing something really important in their motion. I think that many our councillors have made that point very eloquently, and I actually think councillors from the Conservative side as well. But the reality is that we are going to take action in this council. There is a huge amount to do. It's well overdue, and we're going to get on with it. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Now, we can start voting on both the motions. Can we get Graham Henson on screen, please? Graham, you're probably not. You would. Yes, please. Okay, great. Okay, we're going to vote on the motion number 1 first. Is the motion number 1 agreed? What about Graham, Labour side of it?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Keith, yes. Thank you. Paul and Marilyn.
Agreed.
Thank you. So that is carried.
Agreed.
Now, number 2, motion Labour side, Graham and Keith. Agreed?
Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Conservatives, Paul and Marilyn.
Not agreed, Mr. Mayor.
But the motion is still carried because of the numbers. Yeah?
Not agreed, Mr. Mayor.
No, but my motion is still carried because the Labour numbers are higher, obviously. Thank you very much. We're going to go to the third motion now. Can I call upon Councillor Henson to try and move the motion, please? Graham, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as I said earlier on, you know, when we look back, we think our staff have done an amazing job. So during this pandemic, on a Thursday night, we were all went outside to clap for carers and the NHS staff who did such an amazing job throughout this crisis. We've all seen the television reports and heard those stories of their heroic efforts to battle this terrible disease that has swept across the world. But sometimes hidden away are all those other frontline staff, all those sort of public sector staff, and all the community and voluntary people around who also put such an effort in to support our residents through this such difficult time. So I want to take this opportunity, when all councillors are together, to pay a special heartfelt thanks to all our frontline council staff who work tirelessly across the borough to keep people well, safe from harm, and keeping those vital services going. Our care workers, social workers, public realm officers, the customer hub staff, all those staff on special needs transport, and all those staff who changed jobs just so to make sure that the council could keep running. And as well as all the new services set up in response to the pandemic, often requiring people to sort of very quickly learn new skills to enable them to respond to the pandemic. And their contribution in these unprecedented times cannot and will not go unnoticed. And as I said at the beginning, this is our opportunity to thank those members of staff continuing to play a vital role on the front line. And I would like to take a few minutes to talk about some of those people who haven't sought grandeur and saying posturing and saying how well they did. They just got up and got on with the job. And when we first went into lockdown as such, the week before lockdown, the late night telephone calls were taking place, early morning conference calls, as the over weekends, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. As the adult social care team started having to respond, working extra hours just to cover the vacancies that were appearing as people were self-isolating. And I know that officers across the council used to phone me late at night, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And then the following morning, they'd be sending emails at 6 o'clock before the meeting started at 8. We had officers working round the clock to make sure our IT systems could be brought up to speed so people could work from home. And it was the amusing part of the crisis when the council tried testing the robustness of the IT system. But I'd like to talk about some of the other people as well. It's like the special needs transport drivers who took those people from the care homes and our staff to the testing centres in the minibuses, who could put themselves in harm's way in a way to go round and support the social care workers who went round to people's houses, trying to use the PPE in a different way and trying to make sure that those people weren't left isolated. We could talk about the Meals on Wheels driver who turned up at a house and found someone collapsed on the floor. Immediately tried doing CPR, but unfortunately they died. But we found out that that person had just recently come out of hospital. Her husband had died a week beforehand from COVID-19. And that person was worried because now they had to go tested and fortunately got proved a negative response. But they still come back to work and carried on to make sure that those services could still be delivered. We can't go through tonight and talk about all those members of staff. We could try, but the mayor said we've got to finish, and he's only given me a minute to do so. But I would sort of, we will have the opportunity next week when we talked about the staff and talk about those stories, and you'll see those stories come to life. But I'd like to put on record my appreciation for all staff, all the way through the corporate directors and to Sean as the chief executive, to Hugh as the monitoring officer, Dawn as the section 151 officer, and Carol Furlong as our public health officer, who all put in extra hours. And sort of, you know, one time I thought that they were so tired that they might have to give up, but they never did. And so that's why this motion is here tonight. Yes, we can say things privately and then come in ourselves. But this time we have an opportunity as councillors to actually put into words, into actions, what we always put into words. We value those staff throughout the year. And I think at the time of crisis, they're the ones who came forward and helped the community. So I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you. Are there any members who wish to speak? I've got a list here. Paul.
I think Angela's second in the motion.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Okay, Angela, can you second the motion, please?
Yes, will do. Right, so the unprecedented and tragic crisis caused by COVID-19 pandemic was of a magnitude no one expected. This showed Harrow Council staff at their best. The decision-making, the commitment, the speed and flexibility with which they responded to the enormous challenge was truly breathtaking. Education is one of the many areas in which careful, swift and decisive action needed to be taken to safeguard all children, and in particular, all most vulnerable, in the midst of conflicting advice from the government, which lacked clarity and direction. Now, coming from an education background, I saw the enormous extent to which teachers and other school staff, in responding to the crisis, embraced the many new challenges before them, working relentlessly to acquire, develop and implement new skills to deliver live, interactive and interesting online lessons to maximise student engagement, all the while keeping safeguarding at the forefront. Children were very frightened and needed reassurance. Teachers suddenly found themselves responding to the many questions and comments daily on student online platforms. New pastoral systems were quickly introduced to include making regular wellbeing calls tracking and following up children who were not responding. Parents themselves were equally or more in need of space to talk about their well-being and how they were feeling. Playing such a pivotal role in the crisis, teachers were accessible to children and their parents and carers almost around the clock, I would say 18 hours out of the day. The commitment, dedication and hard work of teachers and school staff during the crisis has been second to none, homeschooling their own children, attending to the needs of others in their household whilst embracing all those new initiatives. School staff exceeded expectations in ensuring students remained safe and had a positive experience during the very frightening time, sometimes setting their own well-being aside. When schools began to close in March, safeguarding of children was and still is the greatest priority. With
1 minute left.
Open for our most vulnerable children and children of key workers. The Work in Schools is a very small snapshot of how staff of Harrow Council under the leadership of Councillor Graham Henson rose to the challenges presented by COVID-19. The same effort and commitment has been shown in other areas, including adult social care, housing of the homeless, managing the shieldless and so on. So, in recognition of your excellent work during this time, to the staff of Harrow Council, we say thank you. I second this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Angela. Well done. Thank you. Okay, in terms of the contribution, Paul, can you please start?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I promise I'll be brief on this because I know our hard-working staff are no doubt grateful for us to say thank you to them, but we're also keeping quite a few of them working later, listening to this debate and making sure the meeting runs smoothly. So I'm conscious that every word I say means a number of officers are working that bit harder. But I do think it's important, and I do support the motion to say thank you to our staff. They have worked amazingly. The dedication has been incredible that I've seen over the past few months. People working 7 days a week, people working over the bank holidays to make sure things can happen and things can take place, that people are looked after, that our bins are emptied, that our streets are cleaned, that meals are delivered, that people are looked after who are at home, that children are taken care of. People in the comms team who've managed to get out the messages that have been necessary to safeguard the public, the people really everywhere in the council who have stepped up and made a tremendous effort. I think it is to the credit of this council that we have reacted in this way. And whilst we as an opposition group often have disagreements with both the administration and sometimes with officers, I think what can't be doubted is the absolute dedication of all of our staff to the borough and the people of the borough, and I say thank you to them, and hopefully the debate won't go on too long so they can get back to their families and their meals and have a good night.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, next one is Pamela Fitzpatrick. Pam, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I fully support the motion, of course. And want to say thank you to the staff. I work in the voluntary sector, as many of you know, and there has been, as Graham said, a real kind of working close partnership between the voluntary sector and the council during this crisis. So I've seen firsthand just so many people, so many cases that have been dreadful. It's been actually quite emotional dealing with it. So things like illegal evictions happening almost every day, if not every week, people left with no food, with no money, and also people whose loved ones have died, having landlords threatening to throw out their belongings and relatives not being able to get to their homes to take care of belongings. And every day I would be in contact with somebody from the council and asking for help. And I have to say, every time they delivered. It's really easy to be cynical about the council, but I think it really did rise to the challenge during COVID, and I'm so impressed with it, I have to say. And also want to pay tribute to all the staff, but also to Graham for showing real leadership, but also showing that he cared, which is quite unusual sometimes in politicians. I want to give an example, a story. There's so many, but just one that highlights how staff responded. I had a call one day from somebody from a mutual aid group, and they'd come across a family, a couple in their 80s, One had cancer, one was recovering from cancer, and it was one of their birthday the following day, and they had no food, nothing at all in the house, and they couldn't get out, and their only relative lived hundreds of miles away. And so I contacted the council and asked, can you do something? Can you get some food to them as soon as possible? So they did. And I rang the next day just to check, just in case the council hadn't delivered. And they had. But what they'd done also, I told them it was the person's birthday. They'd put in a birthday card and a little packet of biscuits as a treat. And I can't tell you what that meant to that family, is those little touches. So what also made me very aware during the COVID crisis is that it shone a light on how inadequate our services are, how inadequate our benefit system is, how punitive our laws are to people, for example, who have no recourse to public funds. And we have to change that. And I would hope that the Conservative side would join us in demanding more money from government so that we can provide proper services and support our staff in the way they need to be supported, because we know they're all working to capacity. We know they're doing far more than their jobs. Many are doing several jobs when they should only be doing one. So thank you. My wholehearted thanks to the staff. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you very much. Next is Richard Almond. Richard, please. Richard? Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I hope I'll do better with the unmuting this time. I want to Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can carry on.
Sorry, I want to make a comment on the wording of the motion, and I realise its principal purpose is to thank the council's employees, and I'm perfectly happy with that. But the penultimate paragraph of the noting stage goes on to bring in others as the council's partners and closes with and trade unions, which I realise is a requirement in the Labour motion, and others. Now, the Cabinet's report last week mentioned specifically the role of these supermarkets. The supermarkets kept us going with our food, the vast majority of the population, right through this crisis, and their staff who've actually worked in the stores have shown a courage that allows them to keep their heads up, held up as high as anybody. And if the motion was going to bring in others, I would have liked it to specifically recognise that there is a private sector and that people like the supermarket workers have done a fantastic job, and that their organisational skills have actually left most parts of the public sector trailing miles in their wake. I would have liked that to be explicitly recognised in the motion. It was, as I say, in the report last week, but I would have liked to have seen it here as well.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks so much. Christine Robson next, please. Christine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief. I'm aware of dinners in the same way as Paul Osborne is. Sorry, let me just put my phone somewhere else. I clearly want to echo what has been said. I just simply wanted to add something perhaps a little partisan. Sorry, I realise I haven't put my camera on. Apologies. I simply wanted to say something a little partisan, speaking on behalf of the Children and Young People and Education Directorate. I'm proud to speak for them. They did wonderful work, as the whole council did. Their success wasn't just based upon the fact they were working 7 days a week. They were so successful, and they wouldn't have been so successful if they hadn't already made such strong and trusting partnerships with schools and with health, working for the safeguarding of children and their families. And I'm proud to speak for them in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. Next one is Sue Anderson. Sue, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, can I just say there's a police helicopter going around over my house. So if you can't hear me, I apologise at any point. But really,
can you switch on your video, please? Sue.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, so it's this police helicopter that's slightly distracting. Yes, Basically, I just also wanted to convey my thanks to all the council staff who did a fantastic job. I was amazed. They seemed to work, 25 hours a day to make sure they were doing the very best for our residents. But I also want to do a special plug for the policy team and for the community engagement team for all their hard work, and especially all the work they did with the community sector and the voluntary sector, supporting the activities that the voluntary sector led on so successfully. And it was really appreciated that they managed to develop really good relationships based on good relationships we had already been working at for many years, so that we were able to feel very positive about how we were looking after our residents who are most in need, and also at a way of making sure that in future we will be able to carry out and provide the same kind of service if in fact, as is we suspect, we may have the pandemic returning, we may have a second wave, and this may be something we will have to tackle again in a few months. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Varsha Parmar. Varsha, do you want to say something, please? Varsha?
Yes.
Yeah, can you switch on your video, please?
I will do.
Okay, you're there.
I am.
Video still off? Yeah.
Oh, what's going on?
Okay, I think gone now. Oh, it's gone off again.
Oh.
Anyway, carry on, carry on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear nobody.
Okay, great. Sorry, it's a bit showing. Okay, I just want to reiterate everything that everyone has said as well. But like Sue, I'm very proud of my area for all the staff and everyone going out there, keeping the borough clean and tidy, and also the enforcement officers going out there, making sure people are safe. However, I also, they went in all weathers. I can just imagine, it could be quite nerve-wracking, etc. Being a key worker myself, I've been out working in my shop through the whole period, so I do understand exactly how people would have felt, because I was quite scared and nervous at times. So I want to thank all my staff, and I want to thank my two officers, especially Paul Walker and Mike Butler, because with their leadership, they managed to sort lots of things out, when things weren't right, or resources. As a council, we were touched by the virus as every other organisation, with resources, staffing, etc. But they pulled everything together and made sure that things happened that needed to happen, which were our priorities, etc. But the other thing I also want to say is that I agree with Richard Armand that we also need to recognise other members in our borough that have been the unsung heroes, the silent heroes, like the key workers in the shops, the fire brigades, our social care workers, people who care in our care homes, etc. And we mustn't forget them as well. And they're part of our borough. We talk about being inclusive, we talk about being one team, one family. Then let's make sure that we recognise everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Varsha. Thanks so much. I've got Karima next. Karima, please. Karima, you there?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, switch on your video.
Give me time.
Don't worry.
Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
You're welcome.
Just to tell you, myself and the leader of the council, we did a teamwork for the safeguarding of a mental health crisis. A youth girl went into crisis. I must tell you, the safeguarding team in the Harrow Council did an excellent job. And the leader of the council was giving me the ideas, do this, do that, and my knowledge of mental health, we safeguard that child. And I'm telling you, the safeguarding side, health and social care side, the children's services of Christine Robinson's portfolio, fantastic team, and all the officers. I don't know how to thank you all, and I'm proud to be a councillor to serve this community. And I thank once again the leader to giving me the briefing, do this, do that, and I did it. I went emergency, she was going into crisis, and she was saved. So I'm telling you, wholeheartedly, I'm proud to be a councillor for Harrow Council. Thank you, officers, for your hard work during the COVID-19. It didn't attack one community, it attacked everybody. This is why we should live like humanity and empathy and love and respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Karima. Next one is Krishna Suresh. Krishna, please. Krishna, are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, carry on. You have 3 minutes, please.
Yeah,
Carry on.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank the council leader and all the corporate directors and you know, all the staff because they all have done a tremendously great job during this COVID time and taking the risk of, you know, their own as well. And as well as I wanted to thank all the volunteers, all the voluntary organizations and the faith organization in Harrow. There are so many faiths. They all came forward to, you know, help the vulnerable and the people who are in needs and so forth. So it's a great, I thought it's a great opportunity to thank all their faith organizations as well in this time, and also keeping our Harrow safer. You know, so Harrow is the second safest borough still. You know, all the crimes all reduced, the burglary reduced, and the violent crime reduced, even though the domestic violence is slightly increased, but we are keeping our borough in the second place at the moment. So I want to take this opportunity to thank the Met Police as well. Met Police have played a very key role within our borough itself, you know, taking a risk and being out there, you know, sorting out the issues and so forth. So thanks to all the teams and thanks to all the voluntary organization and faith organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Krishna. Simon Brown is next, please. Simon. Simon, are you there?
Yep, I think I'm here now. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Yeah, carry on. You have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly, I just wanted to add my thanks, particularly to our public health team, a very small team up on the 4th floor, as used to be, of the Civic Centre, and they have really been under pressure and working so hard with the amount of directives from government, from Public Health England and the other Department of Health and others, and they come through it with absolutely superbly. And I understand they have now reduced back to just their 7 days a week, 24 hours a day working, because it seems to me that they've put in a lot more work than was humanly possible. I'd also like to thank our adult social care colleagues, who again have worked, as the children's, as other departments in the council have worked so hard to ensure our very vulnerable clients are looked after, are contacted on very regular, sometimes daily basis, have looked after our care homes to make sure they had PPE when they were running short. And as I said at Cabinet, and I agree with other colleagues, that outside of the council, we must also raise our hands in applause to other colleagues across Harrow, and particularly those in the care homes, the workers in our care homes and our domiciliary care providers, who have put themselves on the line with no thought to risk of themselves, and really we have in the future to make sure that they are properly recognised. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Simon. Next is Marilyn, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'll be very brief. I'd just like, until not that long ago, until May, I was the shadow portfolio holder for the environment. And I'd like to pay special tribute, particularly to the officers at the depot, notably Paul Hollins, and also in environmental health, Richard LeBron, and also the corporate director, Paul Walker, for being so caring and really answering questions and serving the people, sorting out some problems. We have had some with the garden waste and so on, but they have been very responsive, and I think it's important that we do show our appreciation. And I'm sure everyone else as well has good things to say about all of our staff. But I did feel that I'd like to pay special tribute to these particular officers. Also, I would like to thank Alex Dusnett and also Hugh Peart, because we've had opposition briefings with them for the leader and deputy leader weekly since COVID. They've been very responsive and they've done their best to try and get us answers. And I think Paul, our leader, the leader of the Conservative group, and I would agree that we're very lucky. We're an opposition group. but that the officers are responsive to us and do try their very best to keep us up to speed with what's going on and try and solve problems. So I'd like to say thank you very much for that. And I hope you didn't mind my very brief interjection.
No, that's perfectly fine. Thanks very much.
To do when you appreciate something.
Thank you, Marilyn. Now, that Councillor Hanson, do you want to conclude, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I welcomed such heartfelt sort of contributions into a motion debate. On the comments that have been made, there's no disrespect to people in other service industries, but this was really to take our opportunity to thank the council staff who have sort of sometimes go unnoticed around for a lot of the services that we undertake, and people have articulated some examples of how that's happened during the last 4 months. I think what we should remember is those partnerships that we had with the external organisations were very strong when we went into this pandemic, and I think they've been tested very well. And I think we come out a lot stronger, and the officers are working even harder now on some ideas of how we can work better across a number of those partnerships. But I think I'd go back to my original part. There's a number of people. There's a few we haven't spoken about, and we put a full kettle in. It's like with Charlie's team of getting an IT system that only supported 50 people working remotely, and 4 months later we got 63 councillors talking about them on a Teams meeting that's been beamed out across the council. We've had that with with cabinet meetings, planning meetings, and they've worked very hard. We've now got over 1,200 people working remotely, and that's a remarkable achievement in itself. But also when we talked about, I know, leaving politics out of it around business rates, but Fern and his team, as a very small team, managed to sort of try and get people in to do that work, and they were working round the clock on weekends trying to sort of get that done, and they put that effort in. And what we mustn't forget is on the 23rd of March, people, what they were thinking about at that time was thinking, they got their Easter holidays booked, Maybank holidays and time away. All of that was cancelled. Not any of them moaned about it. They just come in, got on with the job, and when you had a query, you could phone up, and Marilyn just said it, you could phone up and you could get it resolved.
Last minute.
Yes, I will say that, Nitin, and I think, and I think collectively, as you look across the council, there's hundreds of examples of personal people who we could thank, and we will do that next week at the when it's been recorded. But I just thought our group would take the opportunity to actually have this conversation at a full council meeting when you've got 63 councillors there, to actually sort of, what in the words of the motion is, I'm going to go back to my trade union days, and when we used to say things, we never said yes or no, all those say yes, but it's what we resolved to do. And I'd just like to sum it up quickly, read it out: to record a formal vote of thanks and appreciation to Harrow Council staff for their unfailing commitment and effort to protect the residents and businesses of Harrow and provide the services that they desperately needed throughout the pandemic. Their unstinting efforts and commitment that made such a difference to vulnerable members of our communities and those residents in desperate need is gratefully appreciated. On behalf of our group, we fully support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Graham. Now we can move to vote on the motion. To the Labour group, Councillor Hanson and Councillor Ferry.
Agreed.
Thank you. The Conservative group, Paul Osborne and Marilyn.
Agreed.
The motion is now carried. Before I close the meeting, I would like to say a couple of things in terms of the IT staff, like Darren Davies and Andre Botha, without whose help, I don't think we would have had this meeting. So big thanks to them, and also big thanks to Democratic Services, Alison and Elaine, and they have helped me a lot to be able to do this meeting on my own. So thanks to all of them, and that concludes our meeting. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well done, Mr.